episode.
Okay.
Fantastic. Whoa.
Let's go.
Nice.
Do you have an intro, Lucy?
No, actually, Peter's really good at the intro.
I don't know. We're going to see. Tell you what, adoring public, here's the intro, and you assess it. Let me know your thoughts. Hello. Welcome to the second episode of the Bates College Museum of Art podcast. Obviously, we nailed it the first time, so we're back at it again with another banger episode. Joining us today, we have Grace Acton, another one of our interns, and we have Corie Audette, who is our registrar and collections manager.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about the work that you guys have been doing. And, of course, as always, Lucy Sherman is here as well.
Hey, I'm Lucy. I'm also on the mic.
Yeah, that's
today.
right.
Yeah.
Let's get right into it. Do you want to get it rolling, Lucy?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you go first, Corie? Tell me a little bit about your role at the museum and, what you do on a daily basis, things you work on, oversee.
Sure. So typically the responsibilities of a collections manager and registrar include the care and preservations for collection objects and maintaining storage spaces and gallery spaces, including like environmental control and making sure objects are kept safe and sound. And we also record the information about the objects. So this can be related to like copyrights or any knowledge about the piece's history or provenance. We tend to try to keep all that within our database, and we catalog objects, keeping track of where the objects are, such as incoming and outgoing loans and other related scheduling for exhibitions. And I'm currently working on updating our collections policy and the safety and emergency preparedness plan. So that's kind of a big project that we're undertaking right now. And I also provide access to our collection and teach our interns how to handle procedures for museum collections and the kind of standards that we like to integrate. And so in this case, I'm working with Grace also on an interesting project that will help our collections database for our public to interact with. So
yeah, and we're going to be talking a lot about that project today because I think it's a really cool project and I'm very excited about it. But yeah, let's also pass it over to Grace here. Just want to hear about what drew you to being a museum intern and what drew you to this project in particular. What got you going on it?
Yeah, so I've been interested in museum work since my freshman year at Bates. When I came into Bates, I thought I was going to be a math and politics double major and a Russian minor and work for the U.S. Foreign Service. And then I decided to not do that. I took a class with Chris McDowell my freshman year that was on fashion history. And I just absolutely fell in love with antiques in general, especially fashion history and old clothes. But really just I love being around old stuff. And after my freshman year, I had my first museum internship, which was at a living history museum called Old Star Ridge Village.
Oh, yeah.
I was one of those people dressed up like it's 1838 and talking to the public, which was very fun. But I also got the opportunity to work in their research library while I was there, and I realized that I much prefer being behind the scenes. Love working with visitors. It's great, but I prefer to be around the old stuff. And since then, I've ended up designing my own major, which is in digital archives. It's a combination of digital and computational studies, aka DCS, and history. And I'm planning to go to grad school in digital humanities, which is a very new field, which is the intersection of digital studies and data science with history, art, all of that. And so last semester, I was in a math class that I wasn't really vibing with. And after the first day of class, I emailed Anthony Shostak, and I was like, any chance there are still spots in the museum internship class? because I had known that this was an option because Dan Mills is one of my advisors for my interdisciplinary major.
Director of the museum,
Dan Mills. And it was one of my courses, potential 300-level courses for my major. And I was very lucky that Anthony happened to have this project in mind that needed some tech skills and some data skills in addition to an appreciation for art. And so I ended up taking the museum internship class last semester. And I'm very lucky that I am now a paid intern with Corie.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I love how specific your idea was for coming in, like in terms of the major, and I'm going to the Foreign Service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I am still a Russian minor.
Yeah, right. So.
But I don't really want to work for the U.S. government.
Nice. Yeah.
Into the project that you're working on, and tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I can give like a brief overview. So our main goal of this project is to make the publicly viewable online collections database more easy to use. At the moment, its searchability is not great unless you know exactly what you're looking for. So if you're looking for a Marsden Hartley, you can find all the Marsden Hartleys by searching by artist name. Or if you're looking for one of our pre-Columbian objects, that's a category already. You can look for that. But if you have kind of more of a concept in mind, let's say protest or feminism, and you search for that, unless it's in the name of the piece, it's like actual title in our collections database, it won't come up because computers can't tell that kind of thematic information about an image.
And we also enter in as much as information as we can for each object in our database, but that's only limited to what we enter in. So,
right.
So if we don't include these other words that we may not think of, that you may think of, then it's not going to be searchable on our database.
Exactly. So. And how many objects are there now?
So yeah, we have over 8,000, probably almost 10,000 objects in our database. So. A lot of works to have to sift through and
yeah.
Yeah.
And when they were first entered in, weren't necessarily thinking of, oh, this professor in classical and medieval studies might want to have a piece of art in a lecture about, hell or something. And they can't really find that. So now kind of to retroactively go back and add these qualifiers to all of our collections information is too big of a job for a single person to do because there's almost 10,000 objects. So what we're working on is creating a system for volunteers to be able to enter that information for us without ever having to come to the museum in person. So it's a digital crowdsourcing platform that will let people look at a piece of art and then have guiding questions to get certain information that we want from this piece of art that we didn't put in when it was first in the collections database, and a computer can't register for us. So, yeah, that's pretty much what we're working on.
Yeah.
It's a big project.
It's a big project, yeah.
And originally, we had you working last semester on basically researching kind of, how we can do this and create this project and figure out, what kind of platform we need to use use for this and to get it out to the public. So you researched a lot last semester, and then now we're kind of trying to implement that out into the public and get it going. And
a big part of last semester was seeing what other museums have done projects at all similar to this.
Yeah.
It's a pretty exciting time to be somebody who's interested in tech and also museum stuff because a lot of museums are moving things to the digital world. It kind of started around COVID time when people all of a sudden couldn't go in person to access museums. But not a lot of places have engaged the public in this way in research. So there are some organizations like the Smithsonian that have done digital transcription projects, which are kind of a different approach because they're very word-based and there's a definitive right answer to transcription. There is not a definitive right answer to what feelings does this art evoke for you? Which is one of the things we're trying to get at in our case. The only at all similar project was from Art UK, which is an overarching collections database for several UK museums. And they have a project called Tagger, which is much more literal in terms of what information they're looking for. So it's broken into a who, what, when, where situation. So it's like, identify all the people in this image. And it could be like woman, man, child, things like that.
Yeah, people stuff.
People stuff. Or if it's like a proper noun, so Jesus, Henry VIII, things like that. And then for what, it's what other objects are in this. So like gown, crown. I'm just coming with rhymes now.
Yeah.
And then for where, it was both kind of abstract things like church, house, or if there was like in the title of the painting, any kind of specific place. So like St. Peter's Basilica, things like that. And that's all great and helps a lot with searchability, but still doesn't get at that. Well, this doesn't have protest as a keyword associated with it, but is an image of protest.
Yeah, we're looking for more abstract kind of words for people to search for.
Yeah.
I remember that there was an exhibition recently at the Bates Museum where could, like, visitors were invited to write down keywords, like, on a piece of paper next to the artwork, sort of what they saw, what they associated with the artwork. And I don't know if this is true, but I think that was sort of something that the museum was planning on actually using, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like a prototype almost.
Yeah, it was pretty much the same thing, but just for those selected pieces of artwork that we had on display. Mm-hmm. But yes, that's kind of what drew us to creating this project, essentially, with Grace, is to make something that could be have the public essentially create ideas for us and keywords for us that will be useful for not only them but us to enter in that information and for everybody else to be able to search for these interesting words that we may not have thought of. So
Right. Yeah, because I remember that show with the keywords, that was from the pedagogy show, and one of the cool things about that was, like you guys were talking about, they wrote down all kinds of things that would not have occurred to us that we didn't think of. One of my favorites was there's this very abstract piece of art on one of the walls, and what people saw in that image was all over the place. Mm-hmm. And almost every single one of them was something I didn't think of at all. Even Dan, the director, was like biomorphic when he looked at it, and I had no idea how this was biomorphic. But that was kind of the point.
Yeah, that's something that people thought of, and that could be useful for other people. Maybe they also have the same idea. So
yeah, exactly. I think that ties in also really nicely with, I was kind of curious to hear your thoughts on how you think this will benefit, the museum, yes, but also the community in the sort of wider sense.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been really focused on is making it a more useful tool for students and professors. So we had a series of focus group meetings with professors, which were very fun. And we had professors from Russian, my Russian professor, a few art and visual culture, biology, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. And so they were all very, very different perspectives on how they might want to use the art collection in their research work, in their lectures, in their classes, all of that. And so from that, we kind of have a better idea of what people actually search for when they're looking for art to use in their classes. So that's one of the really big things that we're focused on, is so many professors want to include art in their class and look elsewhere for it instead of looking at our huge collection.
Yeah, we want our collection to be more accessible for classrooms and teachers and students. So we definitely just want to get that as accessible as possible.
Yeah,
or professors not at Bates too.
Right.
Museum, like other museums, other schools,
and also just art enthusiasts too.
Yeah.
I was thinking of, for theater, when we're doing design things, we like to look at art as examples of different types of aesthetics and things like that. And as it stands now, unless you know exactly what you're looking for, it's a little hard to just kind of search for something that you think you might be looking at for an aesthetic for a theater set or a theater costume design, things like that. And so having these more conceptual terms will help a lot for people who are doing that kind of reference research.
Yeah, and I've been talking recently. I was talking with some folks over at the museums for Bowdoin and Colby, and we have a partnership between those three schools that expands into our library database, and obviously sports rivalries, because Bowdoin and Colby are absolutely terrible. We all know it. But
Colby still doesn't have a women's golf team, by the way.
Wow.
So we don't have that rivalry.
Embarrassing. But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, it would be great to be able to have our collections. I mean, obviously you can't make them immediately accessible without traveling to the place, but have them at least searchable in terms of what they have in a more readily available way.
Right.
That's something that would be incredible to have.
And we often have a lot of Mars and Hartley researchers too that, so we can also use any of those keywords to apply to our Mars and Hartley collection as well, though.
Yeah.
Currently, the museum database that we work with is called Embark, and it's by Gallery Systems. We basically catalog each object in the collection and enter that information into our database. So this includes measurements, description of the object, the artist, the title of the work, the date, the condition report, and we enter in all of that information into Embark. Then this is reflected into our online web kiosk where people from the public can view our collection online, which is really great to get that out there and basically show everybody what we have in our collection. So this can be found on museum.bates.edu. On the online database, you can also submit feedback as well. So temporarily right now, you can also submit, if you think of some interesting keywords about that piece, you can hit feedback and say, I think this piece really should have description about feminism or war. You can submit that, and that way we can add that to our database and expand upon the information.
What will be the future of this project?
Well, in the immediate future, we're currently working on restructuring our guiding questions, which we're doing through a platform called Zooniverse, which I can talk about more if you want me to. But basically, we wrote kind of a set of test questions, and through our faculty focus groups, realized that they weren't getting at the things that really matter to researchers.
Right.
We were a little too literal. What objects are within this object isn't a question that makes sense to people. So we're working on redoing those to be more clear and also have some differences depending on the sort of genre of art we're talking about. So abstract art needs a very different set of questions than a landscape. Because with abstract, we want more what does this make you feel? What kind of emotions does it evoke? Things like that. But for a landscape, we want people to know that it's a landscape and it has trees in it. So that's what we're working on right now.
It was really beneficial when we had the workshop with the professors who came and visited, and they helped us basically see how different questions can have different meanings to people. Yeah. So that's why we realized we need to actually streamline our questions and figure out how we can word this in a way that everybody will understand what we're asking.
Right.
How did you, what did you ask the professors to do? Did you ask them to run something on Zooniverse, or?
We didn't really have them look at our test questions too much. We did show them to them.
Yeah, we showed example questions that we came up with, and we showed them how Zooniverse how you can apply it and work with it. And we showed them what limitations that we do have in our database currently.
Feminine lips being the prime example there.
Exactly.
And then we had a pretty broad-reaching conversation about how they use art in the classroom, which was honestly more helpful than any concrete feedback on specific questions in our Zooniverse site, because when we wrote those, we were just kind of figuring out what kinds of questions are even possible to ask on Zooniverse. Yeah. And what we really needed to know before we can make definitive questions is what end result are we trying to get from these questions? Yeah. What do people actually search for? What keywords actually need to be in here? And then we can work backwards from that and figure out how do you ask a question to get that keyword as an answer?
Yeah, because I'm thinking about what I've learned in the past about internet surveys, and you kind of have to get somewhere between, I mean, you're seeing those transcription projects where it's like a really, really literal task that's super straightforward, and not end up with like a Bodie McBoatface.
Yes.
People are familiar with that example where the British Navy asked the public to name a ship, and the number one answer was Bodie McBoatface. And so you kind of don't want it to be too general and lose all meaning.
Right.
But it needs to be specific so that, I mean, like, it's a difficult balance.
It's hard to find a sweet spot to get people to understand exactly what we need from them and what they need from us, essentially, too.
Yeah. One of the Zooniverse projects that we've been really inspired by is one called Picturing Michigan's Past, which is a project to transcribe and categorize a series of postcards of Michigan.
And
which is so specific. Go on Zooniverse and look at their projects. There's so many fun ones. And this Michigan one, they would have you transcribe some of the information, mainly just the title of the photo on it, and then if it had a date on it. And then you could indicate this has a message written on it that needs to be transcribed, and that would go to somebody else to do. So you could volunteer to be somebody writing transcriptions, but you could also be somebody categorizing them. And it also had you categorize the image that was on the front of it. And what I liked about this was that they gave you categories. So it was things like bodies of water, streets, houses, gatherings, things like that, which is nice when you kind of know the limits of the data set you're working with. But because we're working with art and art is very subjective, we can't really do those kinds of set categories. We tried that with settings, and then we were asked if hell is an interior.
I remember that coming up. Very existential question.
It reminds me of those, like, robot detectors when you're, like, entering a site.
Like a CAPTCHA,
and they're like, click on the tile with the street lamp, you know?
Okay,
right. Does this have a traffic light in it?
Do you guys flub those? Ever?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay,
oh
good.
My gosh.
Because I fail them all the time.
It's like, is this corner of it a street sign, or is it just like a random piece of metal? Like,
I got one that asked about like bridges, and that got really weird. Like they were like really in the distance, and like it really threw me off. I think
maybe
I failed
you're just a robot.
I might just be a robot. It's made me question my humanity several times.
Conceptually, I get why those have to exist, but sometimes the pictures that are generated for them are so hard to look at that you can't tell what's in it.
So it's basically that.
It's basically that.
But with our database.
That's
kind of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what Zooniverse?
Yeah, I can explain Zooniverse since I've mentioned it a bunch of times now. So Zooniverse is a platform developed by Oxford University, branching off of their Galaxy Zoo project, which was a citizen science initiative to categorize millions of images taken by telescopes of galaxies. So these researchers at Oxford came up with a way to have guiding questions for people who were just interested in space to correctly go through these steps and categorize galaxies in these telescope images for them. And they realized that this was kind of a tool that was missing that a lot of researchers in various disciplines would find really useful, because they say that 80% of data work is just making the data usable.
I could see that.
Yeah.
So, for biology researchers, they might have millions of images of the ant colony they're studying, and they need to find which of them have the type of formations they need, things like that. And so Oxford made Zooniverse based on the Galaxy Zoo interface, and it lets people, for free, build crowdsourcing interfaces for all sorts of different projects. So I mentioned Picturing Michigan's Past, which is such a good one. There's a ton of handwriting transcriptions on there, especially for 18th and 19th century cursive.
Yeah, I actually, so I know my mom actually directed me to one of them because the Hall of Fame, her baseball was doing one, and they were basically they have all these letters by Ty Cobb, and they were like, can we transcribe every letter by Ty Cobb? And the thing about it is that should be super mundane, but when you say it to a baseball enthusiast like me, they get very excited at doing something like that. So it's kind of, it's interesting to see those different communities can kind of get activated on those things. Yeah.
So Maine Historical Society has one right now through Zooniverse. Awesome. That's a transcription project. I haven't done any transcriptions for them, but once you get used to reading 19th century cursive, it's pretty fun to just read what people were writing about just randomly in diaries or letters. And of course, it opens up all sorts of historian ethical questions about should you even be reading people's letters and diaries, and at what point are we considering them old enough to be examined and things like that. But the tool itself of Zooniverse has so much flexibility for what you can do with it. There's a bunch of different types of questions you can ask, and we're currently working with them to figure out how to do an autofill feature to hopefully get rid of spelling mistakes if possible. And it's so fun to go on Zooniverse and just see what projects are out there. I tried out some of the science ones, and they all come with a very comprehensive help guide to teach you how to do it if this is something you've never even heard of before. So it really makes it so that anybody who just has some time on their hands can get involved. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is my grandmother is 90 years old. She loves art, and she still lives on her own. And sometimes she just is a little bored. And this would totally be something that she would be interested in doing, because she can just sit on her laptop at home and look at art and write about it, and then know that that's actually being used by somebody else.
Well, and it sounds kind of boring to have to like sit there and sift through all these images and figure out what kind of questions they're asking. But actually, once you start doing it, it's really entertaining.
It's really entertaining.
Hours fly by.
When we were looking, we picked out something like 30 test objects from basically as many different types of objects as we could think of. So we had pre-Columbian sculpture, and we had abstract paintings, and we had photographs, and all sorts of different things. And we brought those up in our faculty focus group, and it was so funny to hear what people's interpretation of questions were for different types. Like, can this image of a 3D object in itself be considered a piece of art because it's a photograph? Or is it the object that's within the photograph that is the piece of art that we're considering?
Yeah, wow. I think people were being asked about those because I was able to be there for those sessions. And so it was interesting because, like, when I saw the photo of an object from the collection, I'm used to the stuff in the collection. So when I see it, I'm like, oh, yeah, it's this object. But when someone new comes to it, they're thinking in that meta level of, like, are we talking about the object or the image of the object?
Right.
Or is it what's on the object? Is it the object itself? And it just kind of became a lot more complicated than
so that's what made us go back and think about splitting up the objects into their kind of category. Yeah. So right now the questions that we're generating are just for paintings.
Yeah.
We're starting with just the paintings, and we'll go from there. And we can do that kind of separating out by category ourselves because we already have that information.
We at least labeled what paintings we have in the collection, so we'll select all of our paintings essentially.
Right. And then we can do the same for photographs, which we have a lot of. And then
we'll probably have different questions though regarding different mediums and types of objects.
It'll definitely be really different when we get to the 3D objects. Because some people will just consider the photograph of the object to be a piece of art in itself, which is tricky when you're writing questions trying to get at what is the object.
A whole other can of beans.
Yeah.
And we're hoping to, at least I am hoping to have this be a future presentation sort of session at the American Alliance of Museums conference.
My gosh.
So I think we'll submit this in, and you can come with.
Yeah. We're also presenting at Mount David Summit.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, part of why I wanted to talk to you guys about this is because I think it's such a cool project. And the more people who know about it, obviously, the more people who can fill out your questions to get some more data.
Yeah.
In there, so it's kind
of
once
the questions are actually in a answerable form.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
please tell your friends. Join. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's very
exactly.
fun.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.